Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your hostess for this evening's show. Andrew is off on assignment. You know, he's a city councilor, so he has a city council ward meeting tonight. So I would like to welcome everybody to 2025. Happy New Year from me and Andrew and the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. And tonight, hopefully, we'll have a conversation that will help us kick off 2025 and help you make wiser and smarter decisions which will make your year a happy, happy new year. My guest tonight is Dr. John Chetro Szivos. And Dr. John is going to speak to us tonight on critical thinking, which is kind of a new topic, one that some of you may have heard about. Certainly wasn't around when I grew up. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you because I did hear you speak. I went to Gardner and I heard you speak, and I was fascinated by the topic, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought right away, this is something we all need to talk about because I don't think we use critical thinking a lot in our daily lives. So with that, I'd like you to introduce yourself to our audience and then answer the big question. What is critical thinking?
What is critical thinking? Well, you know, it's kind of funny how I stumbled onto the topic was I've been a professor for many years, and every college catalog, every syllabi says at the end the student will, show and demonstrate critical thinking, but there's not a whole lot of time spent defining what critical thinking is.
So we don't know if we get there if we don't even know what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's nice, and I think some professors absolutely do a great job, and some people get it. But so much of the college experience for so many kids, you can just get by and not really meet all the lofty goals and ideals that a university sets for its students. That happened, and at the same time I was called to do some work with a biotech firm, and they wanted their managers to show more critical thinking skills. So I thought, well, this is something that I like because I'm always interested in the idea of thought. Well, so what critical thinking is to me, it's that capacity to be more intentional. It's not about answers, it's about asking questions, and it's about being open-minded, willing to change our own mind, and remove our own biases, and really think, is this for me? So think of a sign of intelligence. Intelligence, which is along the lines of critical thinking, is looking at all the possibilities, looking at the perceived or the expected consequence, and then choosing from that which one makes most sense. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, and the great thing about life is we could always go back and redo and fix and repair. But the more critical thinking we do, we're more likely to get to a better place in what we want to have and want to do.
So you think we really can improve our lives if we approach many of the things we do in our daily lives with more inquisitiveness?
Yeah.
Or thinking of more options.
Right, and the amazing thing about critical thinking is that anyone can learn to do it. And I think I've said this, and I know the talk you were in, it's my favorite line is, it comes from the American pragmatist over 100 years ago. So it's not so much what people think is wrong, it's that, do they really know how to think? And I don't think we spend enough time on thinking. And so as a result, we see we kind of make decisions in different ways. And one of the things I think is fascinating is that, we don't make a difference, that there are some things that are automatic to us, tying our shoes, driving an automobile, getting up in the morning and going through a routine. And that's great, and we need those because the brain that we have, it's about 2% of our body weight, but takes over 20-something% of our energy. We can't think everything through. So we rely on habit, we rely on some shortcuts. But with critical thinking, there's some things we shouldn't be relying on automatic thinking. There's some things we need to think through. And I think a lot of us confuse those. Or, it's that kind of, oh, I know what that is. Do you really? And so I think examining our own values and how did I arrive at this point of view is really important.
I mean, I'd really like to talk about how critical thinking impacts on our daily lives. But from a political, I really would like to talk briefly about that. And kind of goes exactly to what you just said. We don't examine what we think. We just kind of know what we think. And is it true that sometimes we make, or maybe the opposite of critical thinking, I suppose you could say is non-thinking, but I would say maybe more emotional thinking?
Emotional or even automatic. And I think when you mentioned the world of politics, one of the problems that, you have these wonderful props here, I'm kind of reminded, if you think of the American Constitution was really so progressive and so far ahead of its time, and it was really written to protect the people and not the leaders. And as a result, when you have this kind of democracy, you're always going to have debate. Mm-hmm. And it means that your citizens need to be pretty well educated, and they need to be thinking. And that's been a bone of contention is, are they prepared and ready for that kind of thought and thinking? And do we just follow along, accepted lines like, well, my parents always voted that way, or I vote this party or that party. And sometimes it's great to have a party and they have a platform, and if you really accept it, wonderful. But a lot of times people just vote blindly, or when we come to politics, and I would say it's also true about so many things in our lives. One of the things that's interesting when you look at, something like politics, they're not polar opposites. What I like to think of as they're a dialectic tension. And what I mean by that is, we'll take our personal lives. If we have a friend, you want some security and some reliability. But at the same time, you want some novelty. And those two things are pulling at each other all the time. And in a democracy like ours, you're going to have argument. You're going to have debate. And in time, maybe we resolve them. Mm-hmm. We resolve the issue of 100 years ago or more, women should vote. Resolve issues about slavery. We kind of, through talk and dialogue, eventually we get it right.
Well, I guess in politics, we used to talk about compromise,
right?
Which kind of brought to some of those decisions, which, of course, now that's verboten. We don't.
You don't hear about it that much anymore. And it's kind of funny. I think the thing that's missing from our political discourse is, no matter what side you're on, is we're in this together. Mm-hmm. And there's a test of 4 things I use. Is one is, what are we making together? How are we making it? What are we becoming? And lastly, how can we do this better? And what scares me a little bit today is that's kind of missing. Mm-hmm. And it almost seems like we're fanatics about 2 sports teams now, instead of, where there's some critical issues there were always critical issues. And I think we need to learn to talk to one another again. And like you said, find that compromise and eventually consensus that, well, this is what's better for all of us.
Now, I know as Republicans, of
Mm-hmm.
course, we, being me, I'm not referring to you. I don't know what your political persuasion is, and it's not part of the discussion. But, we as Republicans tend to think we're right. Sure. On everything. But I say that, but I could turn to my counterpart and the Democrat side, and they would say the same thing.
Right.
But I always say, they make the worst decisions. They can't be thinking. They don't think critically. And they're saying the same thing. So is it possible for 2 polar opposite sides to think critically, seriously think critically, and to come up with 2 separate answers?
Yeah, here's the thing with that, and I think I said a little bit before, it's that willing to be open and have an open mindset, and that there's probably, in many issues, there's some good sides to both. There's a bit of truth in both of them. But the problem is, a lot of times, whether it's sports fans, politics, favorite car, who knows what it is, we become so close to it that we're not even listening. And I think a lot of times it's developing, understanding the perspective of the other. What do they want and what are they after? And how can we both reach a point of agreement? And again, that's that dialectical tension. Mm-hmm. They're not easy answers. They're complex. and it takes time to figure it out
Do you
together.
think a lot of it, I think in politics a lot, decisions and opinion is formed by media, social media, mass media. People don't read newspapers anymore, but TV, media, podcasts, things like that. So that in many ways our opinions are formed based on input that we get through the media.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the media is a huge influence, and probably more than we even realize. And that, when we talk about media, it's not as simple as it used to be. It was, I go to the movies, I watch TV, I read the paper. But you're right, the internet has opened up a world of many, many ideas, and many people are trying to influence us in different ways. And so that, even begs the question more, is that I got to learn to think for myself. I'm willing to listen to all the arguments, but when I synthesize it and put it together, well, what do I feel is the best course of action? And it's harder probably now because we have so much information. Years ago, there was a book written called Information Anxiety, and this is back in the late 80s, and there was an edition of New York Times Sunday paper that had over 1 million words. There was no way someone could read that from one Sunday to the next. In information anxiety, we just have so much, and that was 89. Imagine what we have today.
Sure.
There's just so much coming at us all the time, and we feel it. Sometimes somebody will be talking about a celebrity. I don't know who it is. And it's like, I can't know all of them.
I decided I can judge old age by going to the beauty parlor and opening up a People magazine, and I have no idea who I'm reading about.
There's just so much coming at us now.
And TikTok.
Yep.
And TikTok, from what I'm to understand, is almost instantaneous infiltration of our brain.
Yeah, and then you look at, so many people, I just finished teaching a course where students had to make a change in their life, and I couldn't believe how many of them, these are 18 to 20-year-olds, are talking about how they have to cut back on their screen time because they're spending inordinate amount of hours on TikTok or Instagram or one of those. And that's something we've never seen before. Yeah. And, I think the internet is a wonderful thing. It's a tool. Yeah. A tool could be used to build something, a tool could be used to destroy something. And I think media literacy is another part of critical thinking that we really want to see people do more of is, okay, what's the message? What's it doing to me? And what effect is it having on me and the world around me?
And can the people that I get the media from be trusted?
Oh, well, that's a big one, is that, we don't know. And it's kind of sad that so many people get their news from social media where there's no filter, there's no editor, there's no ethical standards that are being applied. At least we saw that when newspapers started, we went through that age of yellow journalism, and then, the New York Times starts with, we'll be above board in what's there, and then other papers followed suit. I don't think we have that anymore, or not to the degree we did, and that it's just, become kind of this getting sponsorship and getting an audience.
It's almost money readership.
Well, it's money driven, without a doubt.
And speaking of money driven, so back, and we were speaking a little bit before we went on about this, back when I was young, I never remembered the topic of critical thinking, but I never even remember it being taught at school or in my home. And yet, as I grew up, it was part of the family culture to think critically, even though we never used that word. But in part, it was money driven. We didn't have, my parents didn't have open checkbooks that could afford everything. Right. Everything was always weighed against the things you wanted to buy were always weighed against money, cost versus usefulness.
Yeah,
you were hired to work with people about productivity and enhancing productivity and making them think better about, and I'm sure that bottom line had to do with cost savings in the company. What did we do different then that we're not doing now? Was it part of our sort of social structures that we had back then that kept us more in line?
Well, I think some of it is, there's a couple things that happen. And one of the problems of a democracy like ours is that we celebrate pluralism, that you can be many different kinds of people. And when you have people being many different kinds of people, you're not going to have open agreement. I think, in the 50s, life was a lot easier. You listen to what they said at church, you listen to what they said at school. That was reinforced in the home. But as we saw, things like churches don't have the numbers they did once before. People have challenged some of the things they've learned there. We're more open and we're into more transformation. There was something called, two psychologists, Kagan and Leahy, did this work, but we have the social mind, in that to be part of the group, you had to think like others, and you would fear
Groupthink.
Yeah, you'd fear ostracization, or am I doing this right or wrong? We kind of got into self-authoring for a while, where we would kind of be allowed to think for ourselves. But the big fear was, am I being true to my values and my beliefs? And, the new thing now is self-transformative thinking, or self, rather. And that's hard, and I don't think a lot of us are equipped with the tools.
Now, what does that mean?
That means that I would judge everything on the basis of what it is. I've thought about it. I've really examined it. I'm not going to take, preordained solutions. I'm going to come up with it and read and think. The problem is when we start getting into many of the issues that we have, and I think I talked about this in that the Gardner Library thing, was you can break problems into at least two things. One is we have the technical problems. So if I'm going to build a house, I know I need a foundation. I've got to frame it. I know the things I have to do. But when it comes to social issues, like how do we solve racism? There's no easy answer. There's no technical answer. And what we need there is what's been called an adaptive response. And many voices come around that. No one really knows the answer. It's something we have to work
Immigration right now, certainly the hottest topic.
We could look at a lot of them, guns, immigration, LGBTQ rights. These are not easy things to grapple with. And what we need as citizens is to be thinkers. A long time ago, John Dewey wrote a book in 1916 where for democracy to work, it has to go hand in hand with education. But does it? 100 years later, we're still struggling with that. Are we teaching the things people really know? Or are we just teaching to MCAS? Or are we off onto, no matter what side you are politically, ultra-conservative or ultra-liberal ideas, and are they helpful? Yeah. I think people have to decide for themselves which ones they want to follow. They have to know their own values.
Right, and I think a lot of times we don't know our own values because, again, we haven't thought about them.
We haven't thought about them, and we inherit them.
Yeah.
And, society goes on through transmission through parents and people around us. But, step back and every now and then look at our own values and my beliefs. How did I get to this belief? What do I truly value? And, keep working at that. And that's critical thinking.
Is there a test of some type so we can say to our viewers, we want you to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
Is there a test to know, am I thinking critically? Or am I just sort of throwing darts against the wall and
Yeah, well, first of all, I think making the difference between automatic thinking, like tying my shoes, as opposed to making a large decision. Am I going to, buy a new car, live in a condo, live in a house, be a renter? All those are major decisions. I think the other thing is that while we might have an end point, it's not fixed. It's an end in view. We really don't know what it's like till we get there. I think the openness to change, to grow, and having what's called a growth mindset, that what can I learn from this and how can I go about, that's when you're thinking critically. I think you start off with the smallest things. What are the possible outcomes? It's like I was saying before with intelligence. Okay, here's a situation. Here's all my choices. What consequence do I hope to get? And being honest and open about that, as opposed to, just I'm going to do it that way, and that's the way it's always been done.
I oftentimes think of critical thinking and how we're probably not doing it, or not doing it well, or certainly not doing it enough. And so you say we should start with some small things. Where do our friends, our family come in to help us critically think properly or critically think and come up with the wrong answer because they have their own either bias or opinions or things like that.
I choose your friends and family wisely. I always think I used to be a dean at a university, and the best thing I had was an assistant dean. And it was someone I worked well with. And we would run things by each other. And because she was open, she was bright, she would think things through and was not afraid to tell me, I don't think I agree with that, even though I was her boss. Someone like that's invaluable. Getting someone that just agrees with you all the time or is going down another path is kind of scary. And I think, allies, friends, people we respect, and then, see what they have to say and then make the decision for yourself. Sometimes it's what's called, therapists call this framing and reframing, that we got a situation, oh, my life is horrible. Well, let's reframe that. You've got food, you've got a house, you got a job. Maybe it's not where you want it now, but there are some things to work with and work from to make the life that you want.
So going forward now in 2025, I'm sure people, we just come out of, in the case of political people who are in politics or kind of think of that, we've just come through the hustle and bustle of a big election.
Right.
Now we're going into the hustle and bustle of holidays. People are probably overspending, overeating, overindulging in many, many things, over partying.
In the drudgery of winter.
And the drudgery of winter, we've got that to think about. Expenses of running a home in the winter,
Really
cost
expensive.
of things. So how can we look at our lives and make them better, make wiser decisions going forward to 2025 to give people that opportunity to have a better life?
Well, I think it goes back to something you said earlier, that when you were a kid, if your parents didn't have all the money in the world to get everything, you had to kind of be realistic about what was there. And I think, it's sort of the same thing again with our values is what are the things that I can do? What are the most important to me? What can I afford, not only financially, but emotionally? What can I afford in terms of finding meaning in my life and happiness? And then making those decisions based upon that, which, that sounds kind of general and cliche, but I think we start there. I think the other thing, a place I'm really excited about, I'm doing a lot of reading the last few years, is the whole field of positive psychology, in that, when we look at psychology before, and I was a psych major and had graduate degrees in counseling, it was about taking the abnormal person and making them healthy. Today, we still do that, but it's also about the average person, helping them flourish. So flourishing is about gratitude and positivity and happiness. And I always think I was in the grocery store and I saw a little kid, he was probably about 5 or 6, and his mother said, pick a cereal, and he couldn't pick. And then she got mad and stormed away, and he went running after her and tripped over his shoes, and he was banging his hands and he goes, my life is horrible. It's not that bad. Go with the Cocoa Puffs. But so many of us are like that we catastrophize things that are, maybe they're not that bad, and great studies have come out about people that are more positive live longer, live healthier, live happier. Gratitude becomes a huge key.
So maybe we should look at our finances, look at our health, and our relationships, and look at what can I do, think critically about what can I do to make my finances better, not just go out and buy I was talking to our students before, I said, I might love that Maserati.
Yep.
But can I afford it?
Yep.
It does it work in the winter? Does it drive in snow? Does it have luggage if I want to go somewhere with someone? Our health. Does my doctor tell me I need to lose weight? I need to get my cholesterol in check? Things like that, being critical about the choices we now make. And
exactly.
That's
where we can start, and realizing it takes time. I think if you look at finances, a great thing, saving a few dollars here and there, it doesn't seem like much today, but, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you've amassed a nest egg, and you're a lot more comfortable, a lot more secure. But we're always got our eyes on the short things and not the big ones.
Now, you're an author.
That's right.
And so I'd like you, this has been such an interesting conversation. We've got a few minutes left, but what I'd like you to do is talk about your book, what it's about, how they can get it and buy it, because this is a little bit of part of our conversation tonight.
Some of it's in there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's also some local bookstores, Tatnick.
It's on our, you can see it right there on our.
Yep, and it's also an Audible book as well, too. And I promise I didn't read it. Someone who's a professional reader did it. So it kind of starts with defining critical thinking, talking about looking for the right question, not the right answer. How do you begin to question and kind of play with that notion a little bit? It gets into some other issues, but it really does a breakdown of automatic thinking versus being more intentional in thinking. It also gets into some of the biology of our brains, in that when you look at your brain, it kind of has 3 levels. It's called the triune brain. It's been a theory that we have the reptilian brain, and that evolved over time, the mammalian brain, to what we see in the neocortex now. We make more decisions from the neocortex, we're better off, but a lot of us, the reptile brain kicks in, fight, flight, or freeze.
Oh, yeah.
We get angry, we see red, and we're not making the best decisions. So that's certainly in there. Thinking systemically, even some ideas in there about talking with others, and how to be open and create that growth mindset.
Both growth, opinion sharing, and gratitude.
Yeah, in even testing your own curiosity is very important. How curious am I? And am I a person that tries to really explore things, or do I just accept things?
That all sounds very positive and will help us get better in 2025.
I hope it does, yeah. I think I could. But it's not easy, I'll be honest about that.
Yeah. Change is hard, and
it really
especially if we're changing for ourselves. We thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you for having me.
Dr. John, for being here tonight, Dr. John Szivos. And we thank you for being in here tonight.
Sure.
We all wish all of our viewers a wonderful, healthy, happy, and prosperous new year. And maybe a new year that we can bring some wisdom to our lives in the new year. And again, we thank you for watching Your Right to Know and sitting in here tonight with the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. We believe that the GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values, and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and